Let's just go ahead and dive right in, because the specter of the offseason, right? That grim reaper that has loomed so large over this entire season. Well, he's finally arrived at the Saints' doorstep, and sadly, the reaper that we're talking about here, it's not just signaling the end of the season, but that's why last night's loss was so impactful. Is that really what you're talking about? Is you're talking about the end of an era, and not even just as simple as the Payton-Brees era, right? Because it goes beyond that. This team, when you look how this roster has been constructed over the last 2 to 3 years, it was as expertly built as I feel that I have ever seen in terms of trying to shore up all weaknesses, drafting well, signing well on the free agent market, managing to make money work where it didn't seem like it should have been possible. And now, though, despite all of that, what are you left with? A third year in a row in which you exit the playoffs as a home favorite. And now the quarterback is likely retiring. The NFL salary cap is set to drop to $175 million, putting the Saints $100 million over the cap. We talked about executives, member from the front office, that are likely going to get jobs elsewhere, upgrades. Congratulations, well earned. And look, the $100 million on the cap will be a huge talking point throughout the offseason. It's not as intimidating as it sounds. There are ways to make it work, but even if it's not as bad as it feels, there can be no doubt that whatever team eventually emerges out of the tunnel come this fall, it will be a vastly different one than the one you've come to know over the last few years. And so the greatest era of Saints football, just from a regular season winning standpoint, an offensive record standpoint, one of the greatest eras of football for any NFL franchise ever is now officially over. And I don't mean that like you can't be good anymore, right? That's not at all what I'm saying. In fact, when you look, the Saints could still be very good next year, right? They could absolutely still be a playoff team. There's a lot that they have that is very positive that a lot of teams would definitely want. But you can remain good, but it is a new era. Make no mistake. This is a line of demarcation from then to now, BC to AD after Drew. And it was a horrible way to go out, unfortunately. I wasn't supposed to end this way, right? It was surely not. It was supposed to end with like Jeff Duncan says. It was supposed to end like John Elway. It was supposed to end like Peyton Manning. And yet now, when you look, it was rather the complete opposite. Drew Brees, the greatest player in your franchise's history, the man who brought a city back from the brink. And make no mistake, I don't want some of the... somebody just linked me their blog post on Twitter. Shout out to my guy, R. Loswald. I don't know how to say that name, but the point is, he titled his blog post Anguish but Appreciation. And I think that's a little bit how most would feel today on Drew Brees, right? And make no mistake, as this offseason goes on, we will celebrate the legacy, the accomplishments, everything that Brees has done for this city, the Super Bowl that they did get. But it's hard not to feel pain today because, like we said, the greatest player in your franchise's history, a top 5 quarterback of all time, a man who saved the city, did not get to go out like you would have wanted or like you would have scripted. 19 to 34, 134 yards, 3 picks. It's the most picks he's thrown in a game, any game since 2016. Didn't complete as a pass over 16 yards. 134 yards, a 38.1 passer rating. Both are the lowest of his 18-game career. And so a horrible way for the New Orleans Saints to go out. And the most frustrating part of the loss to me, in my opinion, and I am someone who I think if you've listened to me enough that you can look, everything we do on the show is obviously tinged with homerism, tinged with a rooting interest, right? There's a reason why you are listening to this show versus national shows. It's because you want to hear about the local teams that you know and love. And so we tend to cover things in a very egocentric way, right? That always is around the team that we cover. And so because of that, a lot of times we end up making it sound like the other team never wins. Your team just blew it. And certainly there are times that is true, but most of the time I find that no, it was really about the other team just playing very well, and you have to be fully objective with yourself, and you have to give credit where credit is due. This is one of the rare occasions where I think it was actually a bit more of the former. I think this was a bit more of the Saints blowing this. Now, certainly there were dominant performances. I mean, what more can you say about Devin White? The fact that this man did not make a Pro Bowl, which is kind of like DeMario Davis, proves that Pro Bowl voting should be thrown out of the window. It is absurd, and it means nothing as to who the actual best players in the NFL are. What does Devin White end with? 11 tackles, fumble recovery, 1 TFL, a pick. So certainly, there were dominant performances for the Bucs. But really, this was about the Bucs just playing mistake-free football, the Saints making too many mistakes, and Tampa taking advantage of every mistake. It wasn't that the Bucs were overwhelming. The Saints just made critical errors. The analogy that I keep going back to, if anybody's played ping pong, you've probably experienced something like this, where you're playing against someone and they're not just overpowering you, right? They're not like hitting these serves with crazy spin that you can't wrap your head around. They're not slamming the ball back in your face faster than you can react. They're not all over. They don't have range. It's just out of this world. But what they are is they are solid and they are consistent, right? And so although their shots are not the most overwhelming, their shots are always accurate. They're mistake-free. They don't make errors. They wait for you to make an error and just calmly return everything along the way. That's how last night felt, I think, for New Orleans Saints fans. Where every time you did make a mistake, Tampa took advantage. And look, it's littered with all kinds of disappointing moments. I mean, Deontay Harris comes out and he's absolutely dominating, and then he gets hurt right away. And make no mistake, that impact was felt on more than just special teams. When you look at the weapon that Deontay Harris had become in the receiving game. And let's talk about the receiving game. Because the other thing that holds true for last night is that the same way, look, mistakes and the Bucs' ability to take advantage is absolutely a key part of creating last night's result. The other part is, where were your best players, right? What's the old saying? There's many different versions of it, variations of it, but you've heard it before. Primetime players make primetime plays in primetime situations. Where were the Saints' best players? Mike Thomas, Cam Jordan, Drew Brees. When these guys play bad, these stalwarts, these all-decade team members, these NFL record holders, they are paid because they are your best players. When they don't show up, well, then you get a result like last night. And for Mike Thomas, what it ends up being is the culmination of an incredibly disappointing season. Can't guard Mike last night was more like can't get open. Nowhere to be found. 4 targets, not a single catch from your $20 million receiver. Can't have that. Not on this stage. It's going to be very interesting to see how this develops from here on out. I love Mike Thomas, right? I'm a huge fan. I will continue to be. I think he has that X factor. I think he has that Jordan-esque type of mindset, but many will call that into question now after last night's performance. And that's what's interesting about these kind of things, right? I said, can't have that on this stage. And experiences like this on stages like this have a way of planting seeds that kind of ripen over the long dark of the offseason, right? A lot of fans now are going to take this game and they're going to mull over it. They're going to stew over it for an offseason. And come fall time, they're going to want to move Mike Thomas. Or when they're talking about all this change, you were talking about salary cap, they're going to say, well, why are we paying so much to a guy who couldn't even get a catch in an NFL divisional round? I'm not saying that I agree, but it'll be interesting to watch this narrative take place over the offseason. Now, for Thomas himself, there's two ways he can respond. Does he come out and ball next year? Or, without Brees, without a certain future at quarterback, with some of the drama of the last season combined with what will be the drama and criticism of this season, does he eventually want to move on? Everything is in flux now for the New Orleans Saints. And eventually, I think that we will all celebrate and appreciate Drew Brees, the legacy, everything that he has done, and certainly there will be and should be some of that today, right? I mean, I don't know. Look, it's the greatest free agent signing in NFL history. It's kind of absurd when you look at the trajectory of Brees' career, especially when viewed through what we think about as football. When else have you ever seen a quarterback not maybe like fail at his first stop, but not play well enough for that team to want to bring him back? And then he goes on to be an NFL Hall of Famer, top 5 quarterback of all time. You just don't see it. And so already you have a huge, against all odds kind of statistical outlier. You combine that with a city that was on the brink post-Katrina, right? A franchise that was one of the losingest franchises in NFL history. Talking about maybe being moved to San Antonio when things looked their darkest. Here comes this free agent off of an injury. Shouldn't have expected anything really, right? What were you rewarded with? You were rewarded with the greatest 15 years of football that you have ever seen if you have been a New Orleans Saints fan. And I don't know that it will ever be challenged as long as we live again, because the consistency makes it such an outlier. And so I will forever remain grateful for what Drew Brees did, the experiences that he gave this city, that he gave us as fans. We always talk about the emotion that sports can bring out in you. And Drew Brees has been a key member of creating some of the most positive emotions that sports have ever been able to make me feel. And for Brees last night, you could tell. He was trying to take it all in. Like everything else with COVID and the pandemic, just sucks. He couldn't be there with 70,000 giving him applause his last time leaving the field. He looked back to the Superdome, jogging off in pads, a little misty-eyed. He later went back out there on the field with his family. 90 minutes after the game, still hanging out, taking it all in. A place where he has spent the greater part of his life and had the formative experiences of his life. In those 90 minutes, when he was out there with the family, one thing that he was doing was throwing passes to his sons, right? And although, I mean, whatever, I don't know what this means or doesn't mean, but I'll just say this. With all the good that Brees has done, everything we're talking about here, everything he's brought to this city, there is a part of me that is very happy that the last throws that he had on that field aren't going to be those interceptions, but rather those passes to his sons. You know, because in times of darkness, that's who we turn to. We turn to family. And so, look, today we'll continue to break down this loss. We'll look at actually what went wrong on the field. Certainly, there are a lot of areas to improve. We'll try to project forward. What do you make? I mean, there's decisions to be made at quarterback. The quarterback market is absurd. We'll touch on all of these topics today. But I guess the main takeaway here is a simple thank you. Drew Brees, Sean Payton, to every single person who had a hand in making this Saints era of football what it was. And I'm fascinated to see what it will be. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, go ahead and like and subscribe below. You want more great Saints content? We got it all here on Off the Bench Overtime. Check out these other videos, share with your friends, and let's grow the Who Dat Nation together. Who Dat?